Hi, my name is Lisette Lutz, and today we will be creating an ink color abstract painting inspired by Mette Tommerup's artwork. We will be experimenting with texture and color pigmentation. This lesson is intended for middle school students, grades 6 through 8. All right, so for this lesson, we are going to be making an ink abstraction using some acrylic paint. So I have some black acrylic paint here, a plastic cup that you can use to mix that black paint and water it down. So you'll need just a little bit of water in a container and something to stir the black paint once you mix those two together. So I just have a little sponge applicator here that I'll use to stir, but a plastic spoon would work just fine, or a chopstick. And then bleeding tissue paper. So this is bleeding tissue paper. When it is wet, it will actually paint the paper and bleed into it. So I have it here in some beautiful purples, dark blues, and pinks. You can pick 3 colors that go really well together. These are the colors that I've picked for today. And then I have my baby wipes for easy cleanup. I have some paper towels on hand just in case of any messes, because this can get messy. And then I just have some kitchen twine, but any string will work just fine. You just don't want it too thin, so not a thread, just a nice thick string, just like this kitchen twine that I have, and a pair of scissors. So for our first step, I am going to combine the acrylic black paint with some water. And you want to put a couple of tablespoons of the black paint and about half as much water, so about a tablespoon of water. And just stir that together. And you just want to eye it. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you see that it's too watery, you can always add a little bit more paint. And if it's too thick, just add a few more drops of water. So I've got that nicely incorporated. And it should be like a milkshake consistency. Kind of like a melted milkshake. Like a thin, kind of like a thin smoothie. Okay, now we'll need our piece of string, and a good rule of thumb is to get that string and just measure it against your arm. So you want a little less than an arm's length, maybe just past your elbow. If not, the string becomes a little difficult to manage. So this length is pretty good. I'm happy with this length. You don't want it longer than the paper. And then our paper, which is 12 inches by 18 inches, you want to get that ready and prepared in front of you. My work table, I've actually covered with a piece of parchment paper just because this is a little bit messy and I don't want to get the table dirty. So you've got your string, your black paint, and then you need to prepare your bleeding tissue. So you're going to tear your bleeding tissue. You don't need to use the scissors. You're going to use your hands. I like this natural kind of torn edge and the effect that it gives you if the paper is torn instead of cut with a harsh edge with a scissor. So you just want to kind of tear some nice organic shapes. They don't need to be perfect. And you want to do this with your 3 colors. And they can be about as long as your finger. You don't want them too long. Just manageable strips. So I've got some of the dark blue and light purple, and I have the fuchsia. So after those are torn, I have a nice little tray under here with some pre-torn pieces. Just have those in a dry area next to you, ready to use once your abstraction is dry and ready for the color. So now we're going to go ahead and do our abstract ink design. So you're going to take your string And you're gonna dip it inside of that cup. And I'm gonna use that little end of the stick applicator to really dip that string into the black ink. That way the string is coated nicely with that black color. I got a little drop on my paper there, but that's okay. That's gonna actually add to my design. That's the beauty of this. So once your string is dipped, you're gonna work quickly and just drape it over your paper, and you're going to spin that string and twirl it to get a nice design. And that's it. Here I have the finished ink abstraction that has now dried. It's nice and dry, you can see. It's not gonna smear. And we're not gonna need that ink anymore. So you can go ahead and put away your ink and bring those tissue paper pieces now in front of you, because we're gonna be working with those. So I'm gonna be using a paintbrush to wet and dip into the water. So you're gonna wet your brush, and you wanna keep one of your hands dry. This is very important. And you're gonna take your tissue paper, and you're going to wet your paper in the area that you're gonna drop the tissue paper. So you wanna put a little puddle of water there, and it's gonna stick. It's gonna stick right on, just like a magnet. It just starts to absorb that water. And you can put a little bit of water on top. Again, I'm using my dry hand. I'm gonna use a different color right next to it. Put a puddle, drop the tissue paper. Try not to dip these fingers into the wet tissue paper, because then you're gonna start to have rainbow fingers, unless you want rainbow fingers. And you can overlap the colors. So you're gonna dip, wet, and drop. Put a little bit of water on top. So just continue this step all the way until your entire abstraction is covered. All right, so once the entire abstraction, the ink is covered with this tissue paper, bleeding tissue papers, you can see that the color already is starting to fade out of the tissue paper, and it's being absorbed into the actual paper that you started with. You don't want to rub too much because you don't want those pieces to fall off. Now is important time to just let it sit and let it dry. You want to leave it for a couple of hours. You'll know it's dry when the tissue papers just start to fall off naturally. So we're just going to leave this to dry, and then you're going to see how beautiful it looks when it's finished. All right, so the tissue paper is completely dry, and now you just remove it. Should come right off. Sometimes it sticks a little bit to the black paint. If that happens, you just kind of have to scratch it off with your finger. But this time it didn't. Wonderful. So you can see how the tissue paper bled onto the drawing paper. It even went through to some of the edges on the back. But you could see how beautiful the effects of the colors bleeding together and how nicely the color combination goes together. It makes it more exciting to look at. And those ink lines, you see the ones at the diagonal, and they swirl across, making this a beautifully balanced composition. I hope you all enjoyed this lesson. Thank you.